Strong Dads wants to thank 4Speed on 50 for sponsoring today's show. If you like classic cars, great food, and a taste of Americana, you have to visit 4Speed on 50's Diner, located on Route 50 in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Stop in today for a meal and an experience you won't soon forget at 4Speed on 50's Diner. Welcome to Strong Dads. This is Merle Hutchinson, and I'm being joined by a guest today. We have a great show today, and I'm just going to tell you that our show will and does impact every single person that's out there, whether you're listening or not. This show is going to impact you, and it may be from different perspectives, from the parenting perspective, from the forgiveness perspective, from just dealing with tough things. So lots of different topics that will come up in this. But before we go any farther, I'd like to introduce our guest, Mike Dusold. Mike, how are you doing today?
I am doing great, Hutch. Always good to see you. Always good to be with you.
You too.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for joining us. I've known Mike for a little while. Met you first through the church world, right? And we were in a Bible study through that time. Huddle. Remember Huddle?
39 weeks.
39.
It was a great experience.
It was.
It really was.
It was a great chance to go deep and to learn the Word, but the guys, too, that we were in that with. So got to know each other from that situation. And even then, I mean, I knew a little bit about some of your family dynamic just because it happens when you're in a group like that. But more specifically, we're going to talk, and I'm going to let you pretty much take the lead on a lot of this because this is your story, your family story. But we're going to talk about your son, Brian, who's no longer with us, right? And we're going to share a little bit of that story, and we can set that up here in just a second. But just what you have gone through, but what your family has learned, some of what's happened there, okay? So before I go on any further, let me thank our sponsors, and you and I can get rolling, okay? All right. We would like to thank Quality Auto Mart, Casey's Outdoor Solutions, and 4Speed on 50 Diner. So we want to thank really all of you guys out there that are listening, and you ladies too. We know we have a lot of ladies that listen as well, and then they say, honey, you should listen to this show, right? But we want to thank all of you. We want to thank our sponsors because, you know, the bottom line is there's messages of all types that are being put out there. And we believe here at Rock Solid Families and Strong Dads that if we don't get the family right, we haven't even begun to scratch the surface on making things better. We've got to really focus on the family. We've got to get it right. And in particular, we know that getting it right starts with Christ and then strong dads. And I just spent a weekend with a bunch of men camping. It was 14 degrees at night. That was really comfortable. But that idea, there was a call out to men to stand up even when it's difficult. And stand up and take over your family, not in a dictatorship, but in a lead well. So that's what this is about. So we want to thank our sponsors. We want to thank all you that listen. And we just ask that you continue to do and share these shows. Mike, let's get into your story. This is about your son, Brian. So I'm going to let you set this up. You can take it back as long as you want, right? When he was born, I don't know, right? Share your story, and then let's take it apart from there.
All right. Yeah. So son Brian was born in 1985. So, and I thought, lived a pretty normal childhood. Loved sports. Grew up in a family of four. So he was number 3 of 4. We have one daughter and with father of 3. And he developed, as kind of as he went into high school, really started hanging out with some of the wrong kids, developed some marijuana habits, which ultimately led to his drug of choice, which was heroin. So Brian, starting probably late teens, early 20s, pretty bad, strong heroin addiction, in and out of treatment programs, in and out of jail, thefts to support his habit, et cetera, et cetera. So obviously very difficult times to deal with that as a parent. And so, again, he I remember one time he was actually brought back from the dead with Narcan You can imagine as a parent, you get the call, this is Officer so-and-so, Cincinnati Police. Your son Brian's overdosed on heroin. Don't know if he's dead or alive. You should probably get down there. So again,
Wow.
the folks listening to this, you can just imagine how you'd feel as a parent getting that call. So he was actually brought back from the dead, I believe it was 3 times with Narcan. So we really had some time, may sound odd to some, but we had some time to really process his death really before it actually happened. So Brian ultimately died of an overdose. So it was cocaine laced with fentanyl, October 6th of 2021. And
how old was he?
so he would have been, let's see, if I do the math, about 36.
Okay, so we're not talking about a 19-year-old here. He'd had quite a time of in and out of the drugs and experimentation and use and all that stuff.
That's exactly right. And so it really is a sad story in a lot of ways. He left 2 babies. He left a 3-year-old son. He had left also then a baby to be born a few months later in March, the March after he died. A little girl was born. So, and the interesting thing, though, about Brian, and I want to share this story of hope to your listeners here, Hutch, and that is he had turned his life around completely, like the last 5 years of his life. So he was the only one of our 4 children didn't graduate college. But towards the end of his life, gosh, he worked in logistics sales, making 6-figure income. He had closed on a $300,000 house a week before he died. So he was preparing the room, baby's room, the crib, and everything, and then poof, he's gone. So mom of the baby girl to be born found him, and then his friend, Brian's friend, was found dead, overdose, on the porch next door to Brian's home. So there were actually it's a double tragedy from that standpoint. But again, I like to share Brian's story as a story of hope and faith to people who really need it. We've talked about it, Hutch. I look at opioid use disorder. It's like the next cancer. Every family's touched by it.
Yeah.
You know somebody, whether it's in your family or maybe it's a coworker, neighbor, maybe it's somebody you go to church with. So nobody's immune from it. And a lot of people aren't comfortable talking about it. I am. Doesn't make me any better. Just different, And I'm different, all right. Just ask my bride of 48 years.
Right.
I'm different, all right. So, but I'm comfortable, and I just want to share that story of hope.
Yeah. When you think back, there's a lot of things when you think of this, like, well, gosh, when did I'll just use the phrase, when did he go off the rails? When did we lose this one? We have our other kids who seem to go down a route that was a little bit healthier. When did this all start to happen? And Linda and I, we have 5 kids, and they each have their own personality and they're choosing different routes. And you sometimes go, okay, like I always say, like stop buying a parenting book to parent all your kids, because there is no one parenting book to parent all your kids, because they have such a different way that they all go about life. What were you doing that was working with the other kids that was maybe not just, and I just say that like as anybody who's out there listening, like, man, these were some maybe red flags that we wish we would have paid a little bit closer attention to or addressed differently?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, Hutch. And I think part of it, looking back on it, I really wish that Connie and I would have been more aware of some of the symptoms of heroin use, with things like the speech, the tiredness, the lethargy, just the lack of energy, the friends, or the kind of the good friends going away.
Yeah,
I think some of those were some of the signs that I wish we could have caught maybe a bit earlier. Again, it may have ended differently, it may have not. But, this was probably around well, I'll tell you, looking back, to graduate high school, it was like, man, is he going to actually be able to graduate high school? And he did, which was good. But then things really started going downhill, I'd say a couple of years after that, so 20-ish. Again, in and out of treatment programs, et cetera, et cetera. But But Brian did wind up in a program in Dayton. And he got out of that program. It was basically a lockdown program. He got out of that program about 5 years before he died. He was a completely different person. So he was just a joy to be with. And given what he'd been through, he turned out really to be an inspiration to our whole family and to others. Because, again, he could accept others just the way that they are. And he had the gift of hospitality, made everybody feel super welcome.
Yeah.
And so he really, I think he changed a lot of lives with the way that when he came out. Again, this is a story of hope for those who have family members or loved ones going through addiction, substance use disorder, opioid use disorder, alcoholism, whatever it is. There is hope out there.
Yeah.
And Brian's story is a story of hope. I met at the funeral, I probably met, I would say, about 30 people that I had prayed for without names or faces. It's like, God, help these folks who need help, with substance use disorder. And so many people would come up to me and they said, yeah, Brian was whatever. He led my Friday night group, or he gave a testimony on such and such another group. And he really inspired me. So I know he changed a lot of lives, and there's so much to be gained, information, love to be gained from folks who've actually gone through, what Brian actually went through.
You said he was, at least you believe he was 5 years sober before he passed away?
Yes.
Can you recall when he fell back, or... was this, I'm going to experiment one time here and it happened to be the wrong stuff with the fentanyl? Or do you think he actually was playing in and out over these past 5 years?
Yeah, our sense was he was not involved. He had everything to live for, and he was living a great life.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not going to blame his friend. His friend was found dead the next day. Mm-hmm. His friend had gotten out of a program, and they had connected. And again, I always say, for Brian and everybody else, it's a world of choices and consequences. And Brian made a choice that ultimately led to his death. So I'm not going to blame it on the friend, but basically, he reconnected with a friend, and it was pretty sudden. In my understanding, this case, Brian's case of the dealer dealing the drugs that killed these two men, went to federal court, which very, very few cases do, because you really need solid evidence to go to federal court case. And our understanding that was brought out in court, and before the plea agreement was accepted in June of 24, was that the dealer did not know that the fentanyl was in this drug, was in the cocaine. So, but again, all it takes, and again, anybody listening here, all it takes is one time. And I always say it's that first fork in the road, the first fork in the road to use or not to use. That's the choice that really can set your life on a whole different course. And now it's different. It's different than it was, let's say, 20 years ago, or now, somebody might say, hey, I'm going to study all night for a high school exam and I need Adderall or whatever. And now some of these so-called, more harmless drugs, so to speak, are laced with fentanyl as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy.
So it's hard.
So you talk about this as a story of hope, and I want to make sure that myself and our listeners out there recognize, what do you mean hope? He's not with us anymore. So where are you talking, where's the hope, okay? The hope from my perspective would be, I hope my son doesn't continue down the path he's on. What's your hope from this?
Well, I think the story of hope is that, for a moment, I'm going to put faith aside. Now, I really can't do that because I look through things with a faith prism. But if you put even that aside for a minute, for folks who don't have the same faith worldview as you and I do, Hutch, Brian's life was completely changed.
Yeah.
I mean, the last 5 years of his life, it was incredibly different than it had been. He was a joy to be with. He changed the world in a good way. Mm-hmm. He touched people. And that love that he had and what he'd been through, like I say, he could accept people just the way that they were. He could talk to people, just being real and counseling people. The other three children, his three siblings, Connie and I are parents of four. So the other three, to a person, they said, "Hey, we lost our best friend."
Yeah.
They could talk to things with Brian, about things that they couldn't share with other friends necessarily, or certainly mom or dad. So that just the life that he led the last 5 years, it was like night and day. So that is a story of hope.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think people need to latch onto that hope when things seem hopeless. Now, again, I can't put faith aside. So to me, the other part of that is the faith story of it, and I'm going to back up for a minute. So like when Brian died, this was October of 21. So Connie and I had moved into a new neighborhood just earlier that year, and we were going to host a deck crawl. I was going to smoke up my Traeger grill fit 13 pounds of chicken wings. So we were going to have 40 neighbors or whatever over and have some chicken wings. Well, I had to send them all an email that I couldn't do it because that coincided with Brian's funeral. So, and then after that, people would ask me, "Mike, so how do you do it?" Or "I don't know how you do it." When they ask me how you do it, there's my cue. So I'd tell them, and I would say this. I would say, if I could die such that Brian could have had a normal life, I would have done that in a nanosecond. But that's what Jesus did for me. That's what Jesus did for Brian. He died, so take our sins away. We can live forever.
Right.
So that's what I latch onto. That's my way that I deal with Brian's death, that he accepted Jesus as his Lord and Savior. And again, that gives me the ultimate hope for him, but also for us here, his loved ones, that process his death after the fact. Yeah.
Well, you and I were talking before we hit the record button, and there's a mindset, and I'm as guilty as any one of this, so, just it happens to all of us, that we see evil deeds and we think it's an evil person. Like we have a hard time separating. So you're telling me this about this Brian guy, and he was a drug user, and all of a sudden the dark image comes into my mind that this Brian guy must be a bad guy.
Yep.
And what you're talking about here now is just that separation of those two. Like, no, let's not say he wasn't doing bad things. He was doing the evil things, the bad things, but that doesn't make him an evil person.
Exactly.
Is that fair?
That is, and you're right. And there's a certain stigma associated with that, Hutch. I can remember actually there was a local news story that came out in print right after the plea agreement was struck in June of last year with the dealer again, who struck a plea for the death of these two men. And basically it was a one-sentence description of Brian and his friend, and the description was this, longtime drug addicts. Mm-hmm. They were a lot more than that, to your point. Mm. They were loved, and they, and again, I just shared with how Brian really changed the world, and just we were just celebrating life and love with him, especially the last few years of his life, which it was like night and day, tremendous. So I think that is a big challenge, I think, societally, and many people can't separate the deed from the person. So, I've shared with some that I actually prayed for the woman who dealt the drugs, that killed my son and his friend. So, 'cause I think she's redeemable, in God's eyes. I think we all are, and we're all sinners in need of a Savior, and she's one of them. And the other part of her story is that she didn't have any record of dealing drugs before, as I understood, or if it was extreme, it was more minor. It didn't result, in any death, but she left basically 2 children. For 7 years. And I thought about those 2 kids and prayed for them. Essentially, they're more or less orphans for 7 years. So, you can hate what the deed was done, to deal the drugs, which is, dealing poison.
Right.
That's horrific. An adult in 2 deaths, that's horrific. But again, she can, turn her life around. programs in prison. And again, she can accept the source of ultimate hope that you and I share, the hope in Jesus, if she so chooses. And she could live a productive life. So to be able to separate the act from the person, I think, is something that, again, would be a foreign thought to people who haven't really latched on to the Christian worldview.
Yeah. Well, as you're talking, I can think of many instances, whether it's watching the news or whatever, and there's been a tragedy similar, somebody's lost their life, and just the hate that you have for whoever you want to assign blame to. You hope they burn in hell. You hope you get your whatever's coming to you. And I say this all the time, and I say it sometimes as a joke, but I mean, Jesus says a lot of things that I simply don't like. All right? I simply don't like, love your neighbor and forgive your enemies and love your enemies and all these kinds of things. And so how long was the wrestling match with you wanting to, I'll use probably the wrong phrase, but seek revenge, make sure they get what's coming to them? How long was that wrestling match to, no, I got to move to the other side of this, the forgiveness, they are redeemable? How long was that, or is it still a process that continues?
Well, I guess it is an ongoing process, Hutch, but I did have a lot of time to process it. So like we've talked about in the past, I have a lot of time to think and pray on the bike trail. So I put 2,000 miles a year on my recumbent tricycle. So I'm an old man on a three-wheeler. But typically I do 50 miles at a time, and I think and pray and pray and think. It's my reset button.
Yeah.
Being on this trail, Little Miami Trail, which I love because I've got a recumbent, so I need something flat. So I had time. So Brian died in October of 21, and then I was approached by the federal prosecution team. This would have been, I guess, very early in 2024, this last year, about this case maybe going to trial or a plea agreement being struck. So I had a lot of time to process and think and pray and think about, okay, what's going to happen? What does justice mean?
Right. Yeah.
What are the implications for my family to go through a trial? Which again, the federal prosecution team did lean a lot on input from me, and I in turn got input a lot from my family in terms of, okay, to open that up would be extremely difficult for many in the family to have to go through that.
Yeah.
And the uncertainty of a not guilty verdict. So ultimately, the federal prosecution team did agree on a plea. If it would have gone to trial, would have been likely she would have been convicted, and likely she would have had a longer sentence than the 7 years. So, but again, it's like, well, is 7 years, and again, we wrestle a lot with this, is 7 years sufficient in terms of a societal, negative to say, hey, you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't,
is
deal
a strong
this
enough
poison.
Message to the others.
Exactly. So is it a strong enough impediment to doing this action that's so harmful? Or is it sufficient to say, okay, 7 years is a significant amount of time, and hopefully again that life inside that jail cell can be changed and such that she can live a normal life and actually be a mom to those two kids.
Yeah. Amazing story there in terms of just how you process all of this. I'd like to go back a little bit and just talk about what is the family's role here, right? I mean, this is a lot about us talking about Brian, but there are other family members. There's you and your wife. What does the family do? Let's go all the way back, like from the time that they were kids and you guys were raising them, your family dynamic to processing when he's starting to use and everybody knows this is not a good thing. What did your family do? Were you guys all going different directions and like, well, that's just Brian, whatever, or were you trying to come together? Like, was he a wedge or was he glue that pulled you together?
That's a great question too, Hutch. And what I would say is, looking back on it, when things started really going bad, and I would say that was like maybe right after high school for Brian, and he started using heroin. His three siblings really realized a lot of that and would have administered some more tough love compared to what Connie and I did.
So they
as
saw
parents.
it and they were kind of like, Mom and Dad, you need to, right? Okay.
Exactly. So, and of course, again, and this is so hard because parents were motivated by love.
Yeah, right.
You'll
yeah.
do anything. You'll do anything possible to save your kid.
Mm-hmm.
But, of course, it turns, and of course, we had never been through this before.
Yeah.
But it turns out that very act of love and protection and trying to shield them from consequences, et cetera, can actually hurt them, even though you're motivated by love. Because that brings up the whole term of tough love that we talked a little bit about before we hit the record button here. So, looking back on it, I think the siblings knew what was going on before Connie and I did, number one. Number two, would have been administering a bit more tough love than Connie and I did. I think, so, and I'll tell you what, I'm so thankful in looking back on it. We've always had a close-knit bunch. The growing up, the four together, it's really been great. And I give so much credit, so thankful to God for Brian's three siblings, one sister and two brothers, that just, number one, never gave up on them, and number two, just rallied around things. But it does present some challenges, certainly in the marriage, because I think husband and wife process it differently.
Yeah.
At least in our case. And again, I've said it a million times, I can't understand that bond that a mom has, baby growing inside her body. You and I will never understand that bond. That's so special, and God-given. So I think that, again, might relate to how moms might process some of this stuff differently than a dad does. And maybe a dad wants to administer more tough love, if you will, or process it differently. And that can create a lot of stress on a marriage. I think it did in ours, but again, I'm so thankful. A fantastic wife of 48 years.
Yeah.
And again, very supportive family, very supportive church. And again, and you were part of that, Hutch. So again, God used you in that process. And also, again, I would have done this sooner, I guess, and would have gotten involved with counseling earlier. And again, I know that's part of your ministry, connect folks on that level too. So what I would say, one of the messages I would have is, get outside help to help you process it. And like that counseling was really helpful for me to say, okay, here's what you can control, here's what you can't. Here are some things to think about that ultimately, you're trying to help, but you may not be. You may actually be really hurting them. So all these things help. But I think that's one of the things, again, that I am really focused on is the impact on the family. So you got, again, I tried to make it a point to talk to the other three, Brian's two brothers and sister. It's like, hey, understand your love. There's so much energy and time and focus on Brian. And just know you're loved and not forgotten. And we talked about that, and I talked about with them multiple times how much I appreciated them with the way they loved Brian and supported their mom and dad, Connie and me. So so thankful for all that.
Two things that come into my mind, and the first is we talk all the time the absolute importance of unity. Is if we don't have that unity, husband and wife unity, Satan has got a stronghold on you. And if we can divide out husband and wife, we can split that family pretty quickly because the kids will smell it and start to see the weakness, and they'll start doing their own behaviors to adapt. So the idea that you and Connie recognized we've got to be with each other through this, even though, and Linda and I, we talk about this, we process things so differently. I might be more that tough love, like, well, then just here's what he's got to do, you know? And she's like, well, but, and the idea there is not to be right. The idea is to be unified. Come together so that you can cover each other. And, you talk about this tough love, but I always, in the position that I sit from, tough love is a little phrase that we throw around, But when you truly get into these tough love choices, you better play them out in your mind as to exactly what the outcomes could be. I mean, we've had to do that in our own home because in our situation, and it still could be currently applied, tough love could be the rock bottom of rock bottoms. Mm-hmm. It could be end of life. It could be that low. Are you prepared to do that, right? And so a lot of us will talk tough, but as soon as it gets a little close to that, we're like, well, and we back off. So you have to be unified on the decisions, and then how will we handle this? Always expect the worst and hope for the best, right?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts with that?
Well, that's true, I think. And again, for us, I was able to process Brian's death really before it happened. He was brought
because of the multiple,
in and out with Narcan.
Yeah.
Brought back from the dead, literally. And so I was able to process that a bit. And then, I would say, you have to play out the consequences. So, like, for example, Brian had lived with us for a time, in the midst of some of the really, really bad stuff, and, stolen us blind, and obviously that's extremely difficult. So there reached a point where, again, we couldn't have Brian live with us.
Yeah.
And again, I can think of one, again, tough love incident. We had paid Connie and I for a treatment program way down in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, and he shows up AWOL. He went AWOL like a day later, shows up on my front door, and, he wants to get in, and I said, Brian, you can't live with us. And he said, but you're my dad. You have to let me in. And you can imagine, again, going as a dad, even a strong dad, right? To use the term here, that just tears at your heart. And it's interesting because I want to say just that week, Connie and I had attended a Nar-Anon. So, people maybe have heard of Al-Anon and Nar-Anon. So basically for loved ones, people have loved ones going through chemical addiction, to number one, just to meet and to say, hey, you're not alone. And number two, you're not a horrific parent.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's world choices and consequences.
Yeah.
For the person who uses. But anyway, we had gotten some tools to use, just like the week before, and I know that was. I look at it as a God thing, just in the timing of it, to help me deal with that situation in that moment. So anyway, it's a difficult thing to keep the family unified, and that's where, again, we need to lean on our God. I think the closest that I could come to God in terms of being God-like on this earth is to love my son unconditionally.
Yeah.
And I feel that I did that, and never gave up on Brian. But what I would say too, and again, for those listening, Hutch, okay, Connie and I were sick. We had to work our own program, essentially. It's like, this was like interfering with every aspect of our life.
Yeah. Work
life, family life, marital life, just everything. Physical life even. It had physical stress manifestations of it. So, you deal with all these things, but for me, the moment when I was able to say, okay, God, I'm never going to give up on Brian, but I'm giving him up to you to deal with this situation. Because guess what? I'm not strong enough to deal with it. Yeah. I can't do it.
Yeah.
So God, he's yours. And once I was able to do that, I really felt, I felt, and I prayed it, a verse that I've laid out on many people over the years, and that's Philippians 4:7. I had that peace that transcends all understanding in the midst of the storm.
Yeah.
I really felt that, Hutch.
That's good stuff there. I mean, it's amazing because it's real. You had to actually get to that level. Yeah. As you're talking about Brian coming back on your footstep, after he went AWOL from the program, it flashes in my mind the story of the prodigal son. And I've said this before on other shows. I think the important part about the story of the prodigal son and the picture of God there is the father did not chase after the son. Mm-hmm. He said, you have to go. And gave him the inheritance, gave him the money. Go. You got to do what you got to do, right?
Yep.
For you to grow or do whatever. And but when the son came back, you would think, the father just embraced, but the father had to make a decision. And that was, has his heart changed?
Right, exactly.
And I can tell that when Brian came back onto the footstep there of your house, you could tell his heart had not changed yet.
Hadn't changed yet. That's exactly right. And I remember before. I'd visited Brian. I'd visited Brian in various jails, various treatment programs that he was in and out of. And again, there are many treatment programs doing God's work. Just one of many he was at was Cat House, CCAT, by Museum Center downtown. Just tremendous people doing tremendous work. That was one. But I remember telling Brian when he went to this program in Dayton that ultimately really turned his life around. I thought, I need to flip the script a little bit here. And I said to him, because I'd visited him everywhere, never gave up on him. He knew he was loved. But I said, Brian, when you're ready to have a real relationship, let me know.
Oh, wow.
Kind of to your point.
Yeah.
Is the heart changed,
Yeah.
And he told me later, again, in the good 5 years right before he died, he said that really helped him.
Yeah.
It shook him up in a good way, But I want to go back to the prodigal son real quick. So, yes, we accepted him with open arms when things had indeed changed.
Yes.
And it was powerful.
Yeah.
It was, and I told Brian so many times, Brian, one thing that's going to help, it's the power of God working in your life.
Yeah.
That's it. But the one difference, though, with the prodigal son, there wasn't resentment with the other three siblings of Brian.
That was the other thing that I had before coming to my mind.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you the level of resentment. Yeah.
So the level of resentment, it was just the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
So with Brian's two brothers and sister, when I look at their reaction to Brian, it was just phenomenal. They just loved on him. And we loved on him together. It was just awesome. So that's a big difference with the prodigal son story.
So, what's interesting about that is when other siblings see the black sheep getting by with stuff, abusing things, especially in your case, he's stealing you blind and all these things, they become very resentful because they see the pain and everything else that this person's causing. And most of the time, trust is not built by a snap of the finger, okay? So it says a lot about Brian's personality and character that he got them to see that he was a different person. For those siblings, it's one thing for mommy and daddy to open their arms back up, but the siblings, because they know their sibling better even than we do, right?
Exactly.
And so that says something great about Brian, for him to be able to say, guys, I'm healed, I'm better, I'm in a healthy place, and for the other kids to embrace that. Because I could see the other kids like, we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see how well you're doing.
Yeah.
Give me 5 years of this, and then we'll talk.
Right. Yeah. Brian did create that trust. And again, and I instilled in our kids growing up, talk is cheap.
Yeah.
Show me.
Yeah. Very good.
You know, so... And Brian did that. So, but again, to his credit, but also to the credit of his sibs that they could accept him, love him, and see him as a person worthy of a second chance, just like God sees us.
Yeah. Mike is an incredible story, not the type of story that anybody wants in their life when you're even thinking about having kids, that they'd ever have to go through something like this. You didn't think about this when you were 25 and creating the new family. What would you like to leave some of our listeners with there? What kind of message? Is there something that, the last words that you'd like to say, hey, if I could get people to think of this, or if I could have done something different, what's on your mind with that?
Yeah, I would say a few things, Hutch. I would say, number one, get help where help is available. That can be counseling. That can be groups like Nar-Anon, Al-Anon, and just talking about it, breaking down the stigma. Don't think of it as, hey, I failed as a parent. No, it's like I said, it's a world of choices and consequences.
Yeah.
For Brian, anybody else who uses drugs. Obviously, you want to create an environment where hopefully they won't do that, but we do have to realize so much of that's outside of our control as a parent, most certainly. So I think that's number one. I think the other thing is that, again, I would want people to know that there is hope out there in terms of lives being turned around, people going through substance use disorder, again, whether it's opioid use, whether it's alcohol. It could be a number of different things. It could be mental health issues even. Again, there's hope there too. So all the hopes and dreams you have for that young child, they can still be realized in adulthood with changed lives. And again, you and I share the worldview. That's the power of God working in their lives and working through different people and programs, et cetera, to help them. So I would want to take some of that stigma away for the person, again, who's involved with substance use disorder. So you're not alone. You didn't cause the problem as a parent. Right. Love on that child. Try to do your best to see that child, or now young adult or adult, as to your best as God sees that person, redeemable, worthy of second chances in a new life, and just hold on to that hope that we have in Jesus, and just the power of God to work through whatever we're dealing with.
Yeah.
I like to do the serenity prayer every day before my feet hit the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially what I'm doing, I'm asking and answering the question, okay, God, are you big enough to handle what I'm facing today? And I prayed that prayer the day Brian died, not knowing that he would die that day.
Yeah. Yeah. And he is big enough, right?
Yeah.
We have to believe that. Yeah. There's a choice. You talked before, you made a statement that after his passing, life still goes on. And to me, that could sound cold, right? If somebody just heard that, well, life goes on. But I think what you were saying to me is, I'm going to grieve in a way that allows me to still live. And live his life, right? In other words, the whatever good he had does not do any good with me crying in my room for the next 20 years of my life, right? I have to go out, and whether we're doing a show like this, or you're out talking, or you're out creating a foundation or a 5K run or whatever, we have a choice to make. And I'm making this statement because we deal with parents that get stuck in grief. We call it complicated grief, right? Mm-hmm. And it's because we've put so much in this kid, this person, that they kind of became the reason why we lived. And I've seen you, I'm not saying you just like this rolled right off of you like you were Teflon, but you made a choice to not get stuck, but to move through and then figure out how you're going to continue living and Brian's message live. Is that
that's
fair?
That's accurate. That's accurate, Hutch. It really is. And again, it may sound like, again, it's flippant if I say yes. I chose not to be miserable.
Yeah.
Brian's death. It's hard to lose a loved one. Obviously, it's devastating.
Yeah.
But we had to process that. I've been focused on, okay, how do I change his death from a negative to a positive?
Yeah.
And I believe like what we're doing right now at this moment, and people that can hear this and view this, is that our time together here, Hutch, today, that again, God can use that for the good. I think the other thing too, the other choice I had to make was, okay, in terms of the dealer who dealt the drugs that killed Brian and his friend, am I going to hold on to anger and bitterness?
Yeah.
And okay, am I going to hold on to that, or am I going to let that go to God? That's a choice I had too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, for me, my therapy too was, talking to counselors along the way, but also on the bike trail, think and pray and think. And it's like, talking to myself too, talking to God. And it's like, dude, you hold on to this, you're just going to poison yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So I chose not to poison myself with that.
Yeah. Mike, I want to thank you for your courage and willingness to share this story. I hope you guys out there listening, everybody has and will be touched by whether it's the drug situation, whether it's forgiveness. Nobody gets out of this world without that, struggling with the forgiveness. Something we've talked about today hopefully kind of triggered you into a thought that you might have. And so I want to thank you for your willingness to share this. guys, if you need help with these kinds of things, Mike has said several times, to reach out for help, get counseling, whether it's at Rock Solid Families, whether it's with a church, with a pastor, with a priest. Don't go this alone. I think so often you get all this chaos in your mind when there's a lot of emotion around tragedy, and you just need somebody to help you kind of tease it out so that you can process it without being overwhelmed. And I think that's the wonder of that counseling and talking process. So get yourself some help. Mike, again, thank you very much. Thanks for your time, for just making the long journey out here to the studio and helping us out. So any final words?
Nope, just thank you, Hutch.
Thank you.
Always good to be with you, and appreciate you and your ministry, what you and Linda are doing.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, guys, go out there and be a strong dad. Strong Dads wants to thank Quality Auto Mart and Service for being a proud sponsor of the Strong Dads podcast. Started in 1985 and going strong for all these years. Recently, Quality Auto Mart has transitioned from owners of Mark and Nancy Repke to longtime employee Fred and Lorene Venus. For all your automotive needs and golf cart needs, check out Quality Auto Mart, located across from Indian Lakes on Highway 46 outside of Batesville, Indiana. Casey's is a premier garden center and gift shop located in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Casey's offers a wide selection of plants, landscaping materials, home and garden decor, and gifts for every occasion. Casey's is committed to providing exceptional service, a unique shopping experience, and value to every customer. Stop in and see what makes Casey's so unique. Located at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, or call 812-537-3800. Let Casey's help you add beauty to your home.